I'm Sarah Johnson, 28 years old, and watching my sister's face when they called MY name at the National Marketing Excellence Awards was worth 15 years of being told I'd always be behind her. The look of complete shock, her mouth literally hanging open, as I walked past her table to accept the award she was certain belonged to her, that was a moment I'll treasure forever. Growing up as the younger sister to Emma, our family's golden child, I'd learned to expect second place in everything. But that night, as cameras flashed and industry leaders applauded my innovative campaign work, Emma finally understood what I'd been building in secret while she dismissed my career as cute attempts at marketing. Have you ever had a sibling who made you feel like you'd never measure up, no matter how hard you tried? If so, you'll understand why this victory meant everything to me. Let me tell you how I went from family disappointment to industry recognition, all while my sister had no idea what was coming. Growing up in the Johnson household meant living in Emma's shadow from day one. 2 years older and seemingly blessed with every advantage, Emma excelled at everything she touched with an effortless grace that made my own achievements pale in comparison. While I struggled through math homework, Emma was being recommended for advanced placement courses. When I made the JV soccer team, Emma was already team captain of varsity. Our parents, Linda and Michael, weren't intentionally cruel, but their favoritism was impossible to miss. Emma's always been our natural leader, Mom would say whenever family friends asked about her daughters, usually while I stood right there. She has such clear direction and ambition. The subtext was obvious. I was the family question mark, the daughter whose path remained frustratingly unclear. Emma seemed to absorb this praise like sunlight, growing more confident with each accolade while I learned to shrink into the background. At family dinners, conversations inevitably centered around Emma's latest achievement, her acceptance to Northwestern University, her internship at a Fortune 500 company, her rapid promotion track in corporate marketing. When relatives asked about MY plans, Emma would often jump in with her own helpful suggestions. "Sarah's still figuring things out," she'd say with a patronizing smile that made my stomach clench. "Not everyone can have a clear vision like I do. Maybe she'll find her niche eventually." The pattern continued through college and into our early careers. Emma landed a coveted position at Morrison & Associates, Chicago's premier marketing agency, straight out of graduation. Her starting salary was more than I made after 2 years at a small nonprofit. A fact she never let me forget. It's all about positioning yourself correctly from the beginning, Emma would explain to me across the dinner table, her tone suggesting she was sharing profound wisdom with someone clearly in need of guidance. You have to think strategically about career moves, not just take whatever comes along. Our parents hung on her every word, nodding along as if receiving business insights from a seasoned executive rather than their 26-year-old daughter who'd been working for exactly 18 months. Meanwhile, my own work developing community outreach campaigns for local businesses was dismissed as good practice for when I eventually found my real career path. But what my family didn't know was that I was quietly building something they'd never expect. The moment that crystallized years of subtle dismissal happened on a rainy Thursday evening in March, exactly 2 years ago. Emma had just received news of her promotion to marketing director at Morrison & Associates, making her the youngest person in the company's history to hold the position. The celebration dinner at our parents' house was a masterpiece of family pride. Complete with champagne, Emma's favorite lasagna, and a cake Mom had special ordered with "Congratulations, Director Emma," written in elegant script. I'd driven over from my small apartment after finishing a late evening meeting with a local restaurant owner whose social media campaign I'd been developing. My clothes were wrinkled from the long day, my portfolio bag was falling apart at the seams, and I was honestly just looking forward to sharing in Emma's excitement and maybe getting some of Mom's cooking. Sarah, perfect timing, Mom announced as I walked into the dining room where candles flickered around a table set with our good china. We're just hearing about Emma's new responsibilities. She'll be overseeing campaigns for their biggest clients, Nike, Tesla, even that new tech startup everyone's talking about. Emma glowed at the head of the table, her hair perfectly styled despite having come straight from work, her success radiating from every confident gesture. The salary increase is substantial, she was saying to Dad, who nodded with the satisfaction of a parent whose investment in their child's education had clearly paid dividends. Plus equity options and a company car allowance. I slid into my usual seat and offered genuine congratulations. Despite everything, I was proud of Emma's achievement. Her work ethic was undeniable, and the promotion represented years of dedication paying off. That's incredible, Em. You've worked so hard for this. Thanks, she replied, but her attention had already shifted back to describing her new corner office to our parents. For the next hour, dinner conversation revolved entirely around Emma's promotion, her future prospects, and the exciting projects she'd be leading. I shared updates about my own work when asked, the successful campaign I'd just completed for a local boutique that had increased their sales by 40%, the small business networking group I'd started that was growing every month. But these accomplishments felt insignificant in the context of Emma's corporate success, and I could see our parents struggling to match their enthusiasm for my hobby projects with their genuine excitement about Emma's career trajectory. After dinner, as Mom served coffee and we moved to the living room, Emma's demeanor shifted. The champagne had made her more talkative, and something about the family's overwhelming focus on her success seemed to embolden her to speak more freely than usual. You know, Sarah, she said, settling into Dad's favorite armchair with the confidence of someone who belonged in the position of authority, I've been thinking about your situation, and I have some advice that might help. My situation? I asked, confused about what exactly needed fixing. Your career path, she clarified, her tone taking on the patient quality of someone explaining something obvious to a slow learner. I think the problem is that you're trying too hard to compete with me instead of finding your own lane. Our parents looked up from their conversation, sensing the shift in Emma's tone. The room suddenly felt smaller, more focused on whatever Emma was building toward. I mean, we're in completely different leagues professionally, she continued, apparently unaware of how her words were landing. I'm working with Fortune 500 companies on multi-million-dollar campaigns, and you're, what, making Instagram posts for restaurants. It's not really comparable. My chest tightened, but I tried to respond diplomatically. We do different types of work, but I think there's value in helping small businesses. Of course there's value, Emma interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. I'm not saying there isn't. I'm saying you need to be realistic about your limitations and stop trying to measure yourself against what I'm doing. Dad cleared his throat uncomfortably, but didn't intervene. Mom busied herself collecting coffee cups, clearly hoping the conversation would move to safer territory. But Emma wasn't finished. The combination of professional triumph and family validation seemed to have loosened whatever filter usually kept her more cutting observations private. The truth is, Sarah, she said with a casual cruelty of someone stating an obvious fact, you'll always be behind me. That's not an insult. It's just reality. I've always been the one with vision and drive, and you've always been more of a supporter type. There's nothing wrong with that, but pretending otherwise just sets you up for disappointment. The words landed like physical blows. Our parents exchanged uncomfortable glances, but neither spoke up to contradict Emma's assessment or defend me. Their silence felt like tacit agreement with her brutal evaluation of our respective potentials. "I think," Emma concluded, leaning back in the chair with satisfaction, "you'd be much happier if you stopped trying to compete and just focused on being good at what you're actually suited for." The room fell into awkward silence. I mumbled something about needing to get home early and left within minutes, driving back to my apartment with Emma's words echoing in my head like a verdict I couldn't appeal. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't try to convince Emma or my parents that she was wrong about me. Instead, I would build something so undeniably successful that her assessment would become impossible to maintain. But what my family didn't know was that I was already 3 months into building exactly that. What Emma and my parents couldn't see was that my hobby projects with small businesses had become something much more significant than cute Instagram posts for restaurants. While they dismissed my work as amateur hour compared to Emma's corporate campaigns, I was quietly developing an innovative approach to digital marketing that was getting attention from people who actually understood the industry. It started 6 months earlier with Maria Santos, who owned a struggling family restaurant in our neighborhood. Traditional marketing agencies wanted $10,000 monthly retainers for basic social media management, completely out of reach for a small business barely staying afloat. But I saw potential in Maria's authentic story, her grandmother's recipes, and her genuine connection to the community. Instead of generic food photography and promotional posts, I developed what I called narrative marketing, telling the complete story of Maria's family immigration, her grandmother's influence, and the cultural significance of each dish. I created a series of short videos featuring Maria's grandmother sharing cooking wisdom, photographed the restaurant's evolution through old family photos, and connected her story to the broader immigrant experience in Chicago. The campaign went viral within 3 weeks. Maria's restaurant went from empty tables to month-long reservation waiting lists. Local news stations featured her story. Food bloggers from across the Midwest made pilgrimages to try her grandmother's recipes, and Maria hired 4 new employees to handle the increased business. More importantly, other small business owners started reaching out. They'd heard about Maria's transformation and wanted to understand how authentic storytelling could differentiate their businesses in crowded markets. That's when I realized I wasn't just helping individual businesses. I was developing a methodology that could revolutionize how smaller companies compete against corporate giants. While big agencies focused on broad demographic targeting and expensive ad placement, I was proving that authentic narrative marketing could create deeper customer connections at a fraction of the cost. Working nights and weekends from my small apartment, I refined my approach with a dry cleaner whose family had served the same neighborhood for 40 years, a bookstore owner who was competing against Amazon, and a local gym run by a former professional athlete who'd overcome addiction. Each campaign built on lessons from the previous ones, and each success brought more clients seeking what they called the Sarah approach. But I kept this growing business completely separate from my family life. During those monthly dinners where Emma described her latest corporate project, I never mentioned that my client roster was expanding or that my methodologies were being discussed in marketing blogs and small business forums online. When Emma talked about real marketing, involving major brands and massive budgets, I just nodded and asked supportive questions about her work. When our parents praised her strategic thinking and natural leadership abilities, I shared in their pride without mentioning that I was developing strategies that were attracting national attention from marketing professionals. The irony wasn't lost on me that Emma's dismissive attitude towards small business marketing had actually inspired my competitive advantage. While big agencies treated smaller clients as training grounds for junior staff, I approached each small business with the same strategic thinking and creative innovation that Emma applied to Fortune 500 companies. My breakthrough moment came when David Chen, who owned a small chain of family restaurants, hired me after his previous agency, one of Morrison and Associates' competitors, had burned through $50,000 of his marketing budget with virtually no results. Within 4 months of implementing my narrative-based approach, David's restaurants had increased revenue by 60% and expanded to 2 new locations. David was so impressed that he recommended me to other small business owners in his professional network. Word spread through Chicago's entrepreneurial community about the marketing consultant who could deliver Fortune 500 results at small business budgets. That's when I started getting calls from business journalists and marketing publications wanting to understand my methodology. A writer from Small Business Monthly interviewed me for an article about innovative marketing approaches, and a marketing podcast invited me to discuss how authentic storytelling was disrupting traditional advertising models. Emma and my parents knew none of this. During family gatherings, they still saw me as the daughter doing cute projects with local businesses while Emma handled real marketing for important companies. Their assumption was so deeply ingrained that they never thought to ask specific questions about my work or investigate what I was actually accomplishing. But I was building towards something Emma couldn't imagine, something that would finally prove what I was actually capable of when given the chance to compete on my own terms. The opportunity came in the form of an email that would change everything. It was a Tuesday morning in January when I opened my laptop to find an email that would ultimately lead to Emma's shock at the awards ceremony. The sender was Margaret Williams, Executive Director of the National Marketing Association, and the subject line read, "Invitation to submit Marketing Excellence Awards." My first instinct was to delete it as spam. Awards in marketing typically went to massive campaigns with enormous budgets, not the small business work I was doing. But something about the email's tone made me read further. "Dear Ms. Johnson, your innovative approach to narrative marketing for small and medium businesses has come to our attention through several industry recommendations. We would like to invite you to submit your work for consideration in the Small Business Innovation category of our annual Marketing Excellence Awards." The email went on to explain that the Marketing Excellence Awards were the industry's most prestigious recognition program, typically dominated by major agencies and corporate marketing departments. But this year, they were introducing a new category specifically recognizing innovative approaches to small business marketing. Your case studies with Santos Family Restaurant, Chen Restaurant Group, and Morrison Athletic Center have been cited in multiple industry publications as examples of how authentic storytelling can generate significant business results with limited budgets. I read the email 3 times, hardly believing what I was seeing. The Marketing Excellence Awards were held annually in Chicago's most prestigious hotel, attended by every major marketing professional in the Midwest. Emma had been nominated twice in previous years for her work at Morrison and Associates, though she'd never won. More shocking was the realization that my work was being discussed in industry circles I didn't even know existed. The email mentioned multiple industry recommendations and case studies being cited in publications I hadn't known were covering my campaigns. The submission requirements were extensive: detailed case studies, client testimonials, measurable outcomes, and a presentation explaining my methodology. The deadline was 6 weeks away, hardly enough time to prepare a competitive submission while maintaining my existing client work. But as I sat in my small apartment, surrounded by the evidence of businesses I'd helped transform, I realized this was the opportunity I'd been unconsciously building toward. I spent the next month working every spare moment on my submission. The central case study focused on Maria Santos's restaurant, tracking the campaign from initial strategy through measurable outcomes. In 8 months, Maria's business had grown from struggling to survive to employing 12 people and generating enough profit to open a second location. But the submission wasn't just about individual success stories. I was documenting a methodology that could be replicated across different industries and business types. The narrative marketing approach I developed identified the authentic story within each business, connected that story to broader cultural themes, and used targeted digital strategies to amplify the message to precisely the right audiences. The most powerful element of my submission was the financial comparison. While traditional marketing agencies were charging small businesses $8,000 to $15,000 monthly for basic services, my narrative approach was generating superior results at a fraction of the cost. As I finalized my submission in late February, I made a decision that would prove crucial to the eventual drama at the award ceremony. I told no one about the nomination. Not my parents, not Emma, not even my closest friends. Something about keeping it secret felt important, like protecting a fragile possibility from the family dynamics that had so often diminished my achievements. 3 weeks after submitting my materials, I received another email from Margaret Williams. Dear Ms. Johnson, we are pleased to inform you that your submission has been selected as a finalist in the Small Business Innovation category. The final presentation and awards ceremony will be held on April 15th at the Palmer House Hotel. I was a finalist. In the same awards program where Emma had been nominated twice without winning, I was now competing for recognition of my innovative approach to marketing. But here's what made the situation even more perfect. Emma was also nominated this year in the Corporate Campaign Excellence category for a major project she'd led at Morrison and Associates. My family was already planning to attend the ceremony to support Emma's nomination. They'd bought a table for 8, inviting our parents, Emma's boyfriend, and several family friends to witness what everyone assumed would be Emma's long overdue recognition. I quietly purchased my own ticket and began preparing for the most important presentation of my professional life, knowing that Emma had no idea she wasn't the only Johnson family member nominated for a Marketing Excellence Award. The irony was perfect. While Emma basked in family attention for her nomination in a category dominated by major agencies and corporate budgets, I was preparing to compete in a category that recognized exactly the type of work she dismissed as hobby projects and Instagram posts for restaurants. The award ceremony was 3 days away, and Emma still had no idea what was coming. The week leading up to the Marketing Excellence Awards felt like living in 2 completely different realities. In one reality, I was the family daughter dutifully attending Emma's recognition ceremony, listening to our parents plan the celebration dinner and watching Emma practice her acceptance speech, just in case she won. In the other reality, I was a marketing professional preparing to present innovative methodologies to an audience of industry leaders who would determine whether my work deserved national recognition. Emma's confidence about the ceremony was both amusing and nerve-wracking to witness. She'd had her dress professionally tailored, hired a stylist for her hair and makeup, and even commissioned a professional photographer to capture her hopefully victorious moment. Our parents were equally invested, treating it like the culmination of everything they'd hoped for from their overachieving daughter. I think this is finally Emma's year, Mom said during our family dinner the Sunday before the ceremony. Her presentation about the Tesla campaign was absolutely brilliant. The judges would be crazy not to recognize work of that caliber. Emma glowed under the praise, describing her campaign strategy with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned her own abilities. The key was understanding Tesla's brand psychology and creating emotional connections that transcended traditional automotive marketing, she explained to our captive family audience. It's the kind of strategic thinking that separates real marketers from people who just post on social media. The casual dismissal of social media marketing, exactly the type of work my family thought I did, made me bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Emma had no idea that my social media posting had generated case studies being taught in graduate marketing programs at 3 different universities. Our parents hung on every word of Emma's analysis, asking thoughtful questions about her creative process and strategic decisions. The conversation reinforced everything that had shaped our family dynamic for decades. Emma was the daughter with sophisticated professional insights, while I remained the supportive sister whose own work was too simple to warrant serious discussion. "Sarah, you should come with us," Dad suggested as they discussed transportation arrangements for the ceremony. "It would be good for you to see what high-level marketing looks like. You might learn something that could help with your restaurant projects." The suggestion that I needed to observe real marketing to improve my restaurant projects was exactly the type of well-meaning condescension I'd grown accustomed to over the years. "I'd love to come," I replied, which was absolutely true for reasons they couldn't imagine. Emma was gracious about including me in their celebration plans. "Of course you should be there," she said warmly. "Family support means everything, and honestly, it'll be fun for you to see how these industry events work." What made the situation even more surreal was that Emma's presentation was scheduled for the early part of the evening, while the small business innovation category, my category, was saved for last, positioned as the culminating recognition of the night. The ceremony schedule had been designed to build toward the most prestigious award, which meant that if I won, my acceptance would be the final moment of the evening. The night before the ceremony, Emma called to check on my outfit and transportation plans. Her excitement was infectious, and I found myself genuinely hoping she would win her category. "I'm so nervous," she admitted, which was rare for Emma. "This feels like validation of everything I've worked toward. Win or lose, just being nominated feels incredible." I understood exactly what she meant, though she had no idea how personally I related to her sentiment. "You're going to be amazing," I assured her, which was true. Emma was genuinely talented at corporate marketing, and her Tesla campaign had been strategically sophisticated and creatively executed. "Whatever happens, you should be proud of how far you've come." "Thanks, Sarah. That means a lot coming from you," Emma said, and for a moment our conversation felt like the supportive sisterly relationship I'd always wished we could have. That night, as I hung my dress for the ceremony and reviewed my presentation notes one final time, I realized that regardless of what happened the next evening, something fundamental had already shifted. For the first time in my life, I was competing with Emma on equal professional ground, and neither she nor our parents had any idea it was happening. Tomorrow night, Emma would finally understand what I'd been building in secret while she dismissed my work as hobby projects. Tomorrow night, our family would discover that their assumptions about my capabilities had been completely wrong. Tomorrow night, the phrase, "you'll always be behind me," would be put to the ultimate test. The Palmer House Hotel looked like something from a Golden Age fantasy on the night of April 15th. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble columns and burgundy carpets, while marketing professionals in elegant evening wear moved through the lobby with the confident energy of people celebrating their industry's highest achievements. I'd arrived an hour early, partly to calm my nerves and partly to avoid arriving with my family and having to explain why I seemed so familiar with the event logistics. From across the lobby, I watched Emma make her entrance with our parents and their invited guests. She looked stunning in a midnight blue dress that perfectly complemented her blonde hair, and her confidence radiated from every gesture as she greeted other marketing professionals she recognized from previous industry events. Our parents beamed with pride, clearly thrilled to be attending such a prestigious ceremony as the family of a nominated candidate. "Sarah?" Mom spotted me near the registration table and waved me over to their group. "You look beautiful, honey. Isn't this exciting?" I was wearing a simple black dress I'd found on sale, but I'd splurged on professional styling because I knew this night would be photographed for industry publications. As I joined my family's group, Emma linked her arm through mine with genuine sisterly affection. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, and I could tell she meant it. Despite our complicated dynamic, Emma had always included me in her important moments when given the opportunity. This feels like such a big deal for our whole family. What Emma didn't know was that her arm was linked with a fellow nominee who would be presenting to the same judges she was hoping to impress. As we were seated for dinner, I found myself at a table with marketing directors from 3 major Chicago agencies, a business school professor who taught graduate marketing courses, and a journalist from Marketing Today magazine. The conversation was sophisticated and fast-paced, covering industry trends, innovative campaigns, and predictions for the future of digital marketing. "Are you in marketing as well?" asked Jennifer Walsh, the marketing director from one of Morrison & Associates' biggest competitors. "I do narrative marketing for small and medium businesses," I replied, using the professional description I developed for exactly these situations. "Interesting," Jennifer said, suddenly more focused. "Are you familiar with the work being done in small business innovation? There's been a lot of industry discussion about someone in Chicago who's developed methodologies that are generating remarkable results with limited budgets." My heart started racing, but I kept my expression neutral. "I've heard some discussion about that approach. The case studies are fascinating," added Dr. Patricia Chen, the business school professor. "We're actually incorporating some of the methodology into our graduate curriculum next semester. The strategic thinking behind the approach is surprisingly sophisticated." Emma, seated at the table directly behind me, was engaged in her own conversation about corporate marketing trends, oblivious to the discussion happening literally inches away about work her family thought she was too sophisticated to understand. The dinner portion of the evening proceeded smoothly, with Emma becoming increasingly nervous as the award presentations approached. She excused herself twice to touch up her makeup and once to review her acceptance speech notes, just in case. Finally, the ceremony began. Awards were presented in ascending order of prestige, starting with individual recognition awards and building toward the major category honors. Emma's corporate campaign excellence category was scheduled 4th out of 7, while my small business innovation category was saved for the dramatic conclusion of the evening. When Emma's category was announced, our entire table fell silent in support. The presenter, a marketing executive from New York, described the category as recognizing outstanding execution of traditional marketing strategies for major corporate clients. 5 finalists were called to the stage, including Emma, who walked confidently to the presentation area with perfect posture and a radiant smile. Each finalist had 5 minutes to present their campaign strategy and outcomes. Emma's presentation was genuinely impressive. Her Tesla campaign had increased brand engagement by 35% and generated significant sales leads through strategically targeted digital advertising and influencer partnerships. Her strategic thinking was clear, her execution was flawless, and her results were measurable and significant. When the winner was announced, a campaign for Microsoft developed by a team from a prestigious New York agency, Emma maintained perfect composure despite her obvious disappointment. She applauded graciously and returned to our table with dignity, accepting congratulations for her nomination and praise for her presentation. "You are amazing up there," I told her sincerely, squeezing her hand across the table. "That campaign was incredibly sophisticated." "Thanks," Emma replied, managing a genuine smile despite her disappointment. "I guess it just wasn't my year." As the ceremony continued through the remaining categories, I felt my nervousness building toward panic levels. In 20 minutes, I would be called to present my methodology to the same audience that had just watched Emma compete. My family would discover that the daughter they dismissed as doing hobby projects was actually a finalist for the evening's most prestigious recognition. When the presenter announced the Small Business Innovation category, describing it as recognizing groundbreaking methodologies that have fundamentally changed how small and medium businesses approach marketing challenges, I felt Emma's attention sharpen with professional interest. "This is actually really fascinating," she murmured to our parents. Small business innovation is where a lot of the industry's most creative thinking happens. The budget constraints force really strategic problem solving. I almost laughed at the irony of Emma explaining the importance of my category to our parents while having no idea I was about to be called as a finalist. "The finalists in this category," the presenter continued, "have demonstrated that innovative thinking and strategic sophistication can generate results that rival campaigns with exponentially larger budgets. These marketing professionals have proven that authentic storytelling and community connection can be more powerful than traditional advertising approaches." 3 finalists were called to the stage. The first 2 were marketing consultants from Minneapolis and Denver, both of whom had developed interesting approaches to small business marketing. Then the presenter called the third name, Sarah Johnson, specializing in narrative marketing for community-based businesses. The silence at our family's table was absolute. Emma's mouth fell open in shock. Our parents looked confused, and I stood up with as much confidence as I could manage and walked toward the stage. Behind me, I heard Emma's whispered, "What the hell?" and Mom's bewildered, "Is that our Sarah?" As I took my place on the stage with the other finalists, I caught a glimpse of my family's table. Emma was staring at me with an expression of complete disbelief, while our parents looked like they were trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. My presentation began with Maria Santos's restaurant, describing the strategic thinking behind transforming a struggling family business into a community destination through authentic storytelling. I walked the audience through my methodology, identifying the authentic narrative within each business, connecting that story to broader cultural themes, and using targeted digital strategies to amplify the message. But the moment that would become the evening's climax was still to come. When all 3 presentations concluded, the presenter returned to announce the winner. The recipient of this year's Small Business Innovation Award has developed a methodology that is being studied by graduate marketing programs at 3 universities, has generated an average revenue increase of 65% for participating businesses, and has been cited in over 20 industry publications as an example of how strategic thinking can overcome resource limitations. I held my breath, knowing that win or lose, this moment had already changed my relationship with my family forever. The winner of the Small Business Innovation Award is Sarah Johnson. The applause was thunderous, but all I could focus on was Emma's face as I walked past her table to accept the award. Her expression had moved beyond shock into something closer to awe, as if she was seeing me clearly for the first time in our lives. As I reached the podium to deliver my acceptance speech, I caught Emma's eye and smiled. After 28 years of being told I'd always be behind her, I was finally exactly where I belonged, not behind Emma, but beside her, as a professional worthy of the same respect and recognition she'd always received. Standing at the podium with the Small Business Innovation Award in my hands, looking out at an audience of marketing professionals who were applauding work my own family had dismissed as hobby projects, I felt a clarity I'd never experienced before. The speech I'd prepared was professional and gracious, designed to acknowledge my clients and explain my methodology. But as I looked directly at Emma's shocked face in the audience, I knew I needed to say something more personal. "Thank you so much for this incredible recognition," I began, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "This award represents not just my work, but the innovative spirit of small business owners who refuse to accept that limited budgets mean limited possibilities. I could see Emma leaning forward in her seat, hanging on every word as if hearing me speak for the first time. For years, I've listened to marketing professionals dismiss small business work as less sophisticated than corporate campaigns. I've heard people suggest that helping local restaurants and neighborhood gyms isn't real marketing compared to managing Fortune 500 accounts. The audience murmured in recognition. Clearly, I wasn't the only person who'd encountered these attitudes. But what I've discovered is that small business marketing requires even more strategic sophistication, not less. When you can't rely on massive budgets to overcome creative limitations, you have to develop innovations that make every dollar count. When you can't buy market penetration, you have to earn it through authentic connection and genuine value creation. I saw Emma nodding slowly, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked like understanding. Someone once told me that I'd always be behind, that I'd never measure up to people doing real marketing with major corporate clients. I paused and looked directly at Emma, who had gone completely still in her seat. But what I've learned is that being underestimated can be the greatest gift you receive as a professional. When no one expects you to innovate, you have the freedom to try approaches that established players would never risk. A few people in the audience chuckled, sensing there was a deeper story behind my words. The businesses I work with don't have the luxury of expensive market research or focus groups. They succeed by understanding their communities authentically and telling their stories honestly. Maria Santos didn't need a $1 million campaign to transform her restaurant. She needed someone who could see the value in her grandmother's recipes and her family's immigration story. I held up the award, feeling its weight both literally and symbolically. This recognition isn't just mine. It belongs to every small business owner who's been told their marketing needs aren't sophisticated enough for real agencies. It belongs to every entrepreneur who's proven that authentic storytelling can outperform expensive advertising. And it belongs to everyone who's ever been told they'd always be behind, only to discover that sometimes being underestimated is exactly the motivation you need to create something extraordinary. The applause was sustained and enthusiastic, but all I could focus on was Emma's face. She was crying, actually crying, and when our eyes met, she mouthed, "I'm sorry," across the room. As I left the stage, the evening's presenter made the traditional closing remarks about innovation and excellence in marketing. But I barely heard them. I was too focused on navigating back to my family's table, where the most important conversation of my life was about to begin. Emma stood up as I approached, and without saying a word, she pulled me into the tightest hug we'd shared since childhood. "Sarah," she whispered into my ear, her voice thick with emotion, "I had no idea. I had absolutely no idea what you were building." Our parents were on their feet too, their faces cycling through confusion, pride, and something that looked like guilt as they began to process the implications of what they'd just witnessed. "Honey," Mom said, her voice uncertain, "why didn't you tell us about any of this? The nomination, the work you've been doing, we thought you were just helping out local businesses." "I was helping local businesses," I replied gently. "That's exactly what I was doing. You just didn't understand what that actually meant or how sophisticated it could be." Dad, ever the accountant, was the first to ask the practical question that was probably on everyone's mind. "Sarah, when you say you've developed a methodology that's being taught in universities, what exactly does that mean for your career?" Before I could answer, Jennifer Walsh from the competing agency appeared at our table. "Ms. Johnson, congratulations on a well-deserved win," she said, extending her business card. "I'd love to discuss some potential collaboration opportunities. We've been following your work, and frankly, We're interested in licensing your methodology for our own small business division. Emma's eyes widened as she realized what she was hearing. You've developed something that major agencies want to license? Several agencies, actually, I admitted. And 2 business schools want to bring me in as a guest lecturer next semester. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Patricia Chun, the business school professor from our dinner table. Sarah, I hope you don't mind me approaching, but I wanted to personally thank you for the work you've done. We've been using your Santos restaurant case study in our graduate program, and the students are fascinated by your approach to authentic narrative development. Emma was staring at me like I was a completely different person. Your work is being taught in graduate school? At 3 different schools, apparently, I said, still somewhat amazed by that fact myself. As we prepared to leave the ceremony, our family found itself in the surreal position of being congratulated by dozens of marketing professionals who knew my work but had never heard of Emma. Industry leaders who'd never met me personally approached to discuss my methodology and its applications. Marketing journalists asked for follow-up interviews about my innovative approach to small business challenges. Emma, who had entered the evening expecting to be the center of professional attention, graciously stepped back and watched her younger sister receive recognition from industry leaders she'd spent years trying to impress. On the car ride home, our family sat in contemplative silence for several miles before Emma finally spoke. Sarah, I owe you the biggest apology of my life, she said, turning around from the front seat to face me. Not just for what I said about always being behind me, but for years of not taking your work seriously. For years of not taking you seriously. Emma, you don't need to. Yes, I do, she interrupted. I've been such an incredible snob about what constitutes real marketing that I completely missed the fact that my own sister was developing innovations that are apparently changing the industry. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand. Honey, we're so sorry. We've been so focused on understanding Emma's corporate work that we never tried to understand what you were really doing. We're proud of you, Dad added quietly. We should have been proud all along, but we didn't know how to recognize what we were seeing. The conversation continued at our parents' house over late-night coffee and leftover cake from Emma's pre-ceremony celebration. For the first time in our lives, Emma asked detailed questions about my work, not condescending questions designed to offer guidance, but genuine professional curiosity about my methodology and strategic thinking. I can't believe you kept all of the secret, she said as I explained how I developed my narrative marketing approach. Why didn't you ever tell us what you were building? I considered the question carefully before answering. Honestly, I think I needed to prove it to myself first. And I was tired of having my work dismissed before anyone understood what it actually was. Emma nodded slowly. I think I understand that. And Sarah, what you said in your speech about being underestimated being a gift. I think you're right. I've never had to prove myself the way you have, and maybe that's made me less innovative than I could be. As the evening wound down and we prepared to go our separate ways, Emma pulled me aside for a private conversation. I know this is probably going to sound weird after everything, she said, but would you be interested in collaborating on something? Morrison and Associates has been talking about developing a small business division, and after tonight, I think I understand why that's actually a brilliant strategic move. I smiled at the irony. You want to partner with your little sister on a business venture? I want to partner with one of the most innovative marketing professionals in Chicago, Emma corrected. The fact that you're my sister just makes it even better. That night, as I finally returned to my apartment with the Marketing Excellence Award sitting on my coffee table, I reflected on how completely the evening had exceeded my wildest expectations. I'd hoped to prove my professional competence to my family. Instead, I discovered that I'd accidentally built something that was being recognized as industry-changing innovation. More importantly, I'd finally had the conversation with Emma that I'd been unconsciously preparing for my entire life. Not as the little sister trying to keep up, but as a professional peer with my own expertise and achievements to contribute. 6 months later, Emma and I would launch Johnson Marketing Solutions, combining her corporate experience with my small business innovations. But that night, walking into my apartment as an award-winning marketing professional whose family finally understood her worth was enough victory for one evening. The morning after the Marketing Excellence Awards brought a reality I wasn't prepared for. My phone had been ringing constantly since 6 a.m. with interview requests, collaboration offers, and congratulations from industry professionals I'd never met. The local news wanted to feature my story, 3 business magazines wanted to profile my methodology, and the Chicago Tribune was interested in a piece about innovative small business marketing approaches. But the most meaningful call came from Maria Santos, whose restaurant transformation had been the centerpiece of my award presentation. "Sarah, Mija, I just saw the news about your award," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you, but I want you to know, you didn't just change my restaurant. You changed my whole family's life. My daughter just got accepted to business school because she wants to learn what you taught us about telling our story." That conversation reminded me why I'd gotten into this work in the first place. While the industry recognition was incredibly validating, the real satisfaction came from knowing that my methodology was creating opportunities for families like Maria's to build generational wealth through their own businesses. Emma called around noon, her voice bright with excitement. "Sarah, you're not going to believe the conversations I've been having at work today. Everyone at Morrison wants to know about my sister, who won the Innovation Award. My boss asked if I thought you'd be interested in consulting on our small business development project." The irony wasn't lost on either of us that Emma's colleagues were now approaching her for access to me, completely reversing our lifelong dynamic. "There's something else," Emma continued, her tone becoming more serious. "I've been thinking all morning about what you said last night, about needing to prove things to yourself first. I realize I've never had to do that. Everything I've achieved has been validated immediately by our parents, by colleagues, by the industry. I've never had to build something entirely on my own and trust that it was worthwhile." It was perhaps the most self-aware thing Emma had ever said to me. What I'm trying to say is that I'm proud of you for reasons that have nothing to do with the award. I'm proud of you for trusting your instincts when everyone around you was suggesting they weren't worth trusting. Over the following weeks, our family dynamic underwent a complete transformation. Our parents, still processing the revelation that they'd fundamentally misunderstood my career for years, began asking detailed questions about my work and my plans for expansion. Dad, with his accounting background, was particularly fascinated by the financial models I'd developed for small business marketing ROI. "I have to admit," he said during a family dinner 2 weeks after the awards ceremony, "I always thought Emma was the entrepreneur in the family. But what you've built requires a different kind of business thinking, creating value where others don't see opportunity." Mom had been doing her own research, reading the industry articles that had featured my work, and trying to understand the scope of what I'd accomplished. "Honey, I found an article that called your methodology a paradigm shift in how small businesses can compete with corporate marketing budgets. Did you know people were writing about your work in academic journals?" I hadn't known about the academic journals, actually. The scope of attention my work was receiving continued to surprise me. But the most significant change was in my relationship with Emma. For the first time in our lives, we were talking as professional equals. Emma's questions about my methodology were genuinely curious rather than condescending, and her insights about corporate marketing strategies were helpful rather than dismissive. 3 weeks after the award ceremony, Emma presented me with a formal business proposal. Morrison and Associates wanted to partner with me to develop a small business division that would use my narrative marketing methodology to serve clients who'd previously been considered too small for major agency attention. The beauty of this partnership, Emma explained as we reviewed the proposal over coffee, is that it would give you access to resources and infrastructure you don't currently have, while giving Morrison access to innovations that could differentiate us from every other corporate agency in Chicago. The financial terms were generous. I would maintain ownership of my methodology, while receiving equity in the new division plus a substantial consulting fee. More importantly, the partnership would allow me to hire and train other marketing professionals in my approach, scaling the impact beyond what I could achieve working alone. Are you sure you want to go into business with your little sister? I teased as we shook hands on the partnership agreement. I want to go into business with the most innovative marketing professional I know, Emma replied. The fact that you're my sister just means I don't have to worry about you stealing my clients and starting a competing agency. 6 months later, the Johnson division at Morrison and Associates had 12 employees and a waiting list of small business clients. Emma had transitioned from corporate campaigns to overseeing our partnership, discovering that she genuinely loved the creative problem-solving required for small business marketing. I never realized how much more satisfying this work could be, she admitted during one of our weekly business meetings. When you help a Fortune 500 company increase market share by 2%, it's professionally satisfying. But when you help a family restaurant triple their revenue and hire 8 new employees, you're literally changing people's lives. The most rewarding development came 8 months after the award ceremony, when Emma and I were invited to speak together at the National Small Business Conference about sibling partnerships in entrepreneurship. Our presentation, titled From Rivalry to Partnership, How Family Competition Can Drive Innovation, was standing room only. During the Q&A session, someone asked about the moment when our dynamic shifted from competition to collaboration. Emma answered first. I think the shift happened when I realized that my assumptions about my sister's work were really assumptions about my own limitations. I'd convinced myself that small business marketing was less sophisticated because I'd never tried to innovate within those constraints. For me, I added, the shift happened when I stopped trying to prove my worth through external validation and started building something I believed in regardless of whether anyone else understood it. Once I had that foundation, Emma's recognition and partnership became a bonus rather than a necessity. After the conference, as we sat in the airport waiting for our flight back to Chicago, Emma brought up something that had been on my mind as well. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I'd recognized your potential earlier? If our parents had supported your work from the beginning? I considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think I needed to build this on my own first. If everyone had immediately validated my approach, I might never have developed the resilience and independence that actually made the methodology successful. So, you're saying my being a dismissive older sister was actually good for your professional development? Emma asked with a wry smile. I'm saying that sometimes the best thing someone can do for you is underestimate you completely. It forces you to rely on your own judgment and develop capabilities you might never discover if everything came easily. Emma laughed. Well, in that case, you're welcome for years of dismissive comments about your hobby projects. And thank you, I replied sincerely, for giving me something to prove. As our plane took off, I reflected on how the phrase, "You'll always be behind me," had become the catalyst for everything that followed. Emma had been wrong about me being behind her, but she'd been accidentally right about something more important. I had always been different from her, and that difference had turned out to be my greatest professional advantage. A year later, When the Johnson division won its own Marketing Excellence Award for innovative small business solutions, Emma and I accepted the recognition together. In her portion of the acceptance speech, Emma said something that perfectly captured how far we'd both come. The greatest lesson I've learned from this partnership is that there are many different ways to be excellent in marketing. My sister taught me that innovation often comes from the margins, from the places where established players aren't looking. She also taught me that being underestimated isn't a limitation. It's an opportunity to exceed expectations so dramatically that you redefine what's possible. That night, as we celebrated with our parents and the extended family who'd witnessed both Emma's dismissive comment years earlier and our joint recognition, I realized that Emma had been right about one thing all along. I would never be behind her. I'd found my own path entirely. Have you ever had a sibling or family member who constantly made you feel like you'd never measure up? How did you find the strength to prove them wrong? Or more importantly, to prove your own worth to yourself? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this journey of turning family rivalry into professional success resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is building something so undeniably excellent that the people who dismissed you become your biggest supporters. Thank you for joining me on this story, and I hope it inspires you to recognize your own potential, regardless of who fails to see it. Because sometimes, being underestimated is the greatest gift you'll ever receive.